The weapons intended to be a less lethal alternative to regular firearms have been cleared for use at Notting Hill Carnival since 2017 and the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. Look, let's speak more about this to a London councillor, Maurice Mcleod, who is with us now.
Maurice Mcleod on his thoughts about this. Good evening, Maurice. How are you?
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Let's speak to Black London councillor Maurice Mcleod. Good evening, Maurice. Thanks for taking time. How are you?
Hello there, Devon. How are you? I'm well.
Maurice, were you shocked by these revelations, this freedom of information data?
Hello, Dotun. To be honest, yes. While I was a councillor, I was a journalist, and I've been kind of reporting on this sort of stuff in London for decades. You know, I was on The Voice in the 90s, and so stuff doesn't normally shock me, but this did, because, Carnival in particular, Carnival I've gone to my whole life. It's a really important, I think it's the most important cultural event that happens in London, and it's black-led, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's joyous, and children go there. And the idea that plastic bullets are sanctioned or were sanctioned to be used, and it seems like they're sanctioned every year. It's not they apply for a year because they think there's going to be a problem. They've got a green light every year to use these things if they chose to, and luckily they haven't. But the very idea that plastic bullets would be used on the mainland and at basically a party is quite chilling, I'm afraid. So the idea that Carnival is more violent or more crime-ridden, or there's more risk of that, I think is nonsense. You know, you can compare it to any of the big demos that have happened in London. Stop Trump had 300,000 people, 300 angry people, 500,000 angry Remainers came out for the People's Vote in 2018. Neither of those things were deemed scary enough to need these things, but Notting Hill Carnival is. Come on.
So are you saying that the Carnival isn't a war zone like Northern Ireland was? Well, Northern Ireland is when I remember rubber bullets being used, plastic bullets being used, and that was a war zone, wasn't it? So are you saying that isn't Notting Hill Carnival, it's not a war zone?
Well, I don't think we should have been using plastic bullets in Northern Ireland either. 17 people at least died from them when we used them there. But of course, it's not a war zone. I honestly think that there's a group of people in power that look at a bunch of black people having fun and go, yikes. It's really hard not to see it that the police have an inherent belief that if black people are involved, it is therefore more violent. So, and this is proved or suggested, let's say, over and over again. The Met Police are 4 times more likely to use force against a black person compared to a white person. And like I say, it all plays to this built-in idea that black people are just more of a threat or they're more violent. It plays all the way down from large events down to how, the police intervene in school disputes or how stop and search works. So it runs throughout the force, I'm afraid.
You've just mentioned some statistics there. Where have those statistics come from? 1 in 4?
So the 1 in 4... the Metropolitan Police using violent force against black people more than 4 times more likely is from the Home Office's own figures, so they're the Met's own figures. So in 2019 to 20, the Met used force 159,000 times. More than a third of those cases involved black people. So those stats come from the Home Office's own figures.
Now, a spokesperson for the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, said the approval of the tactical option of Baton Rounds in these events only is very concerning. As you say, and the Mayor will be raising this matter with senior Met leaders. But the Met must account for their decision-making, and, of course, Black Londoners, and also those of us travelling into the city will rightly want to know that they're being treated equally. In your capacity, what is your understanding about what policing tactics of large events like Notting Hill Carnival are or should be?
Well, I know what they should be. I think that's probably an easier thing to do. And I have to say, this isn't me speaking. This isn't in my role as a councillor. This is as a 54-year-old black person who's grown up and lived in London and has gone to these events my whole life. The Carnival, for instance, what you need there is stewards. You need more stewards and more people who can help people who are lost or people who are a bit drunk and all that sort of thing. And then people that can, that women can go to if they feel at risk, or if it was thought about in those terms, rather than, hey, this is a bunch of prospective criminals. How best can we curtail them? You'd end up, the event would be even more joyous than it is. That's the way it should be. It should be policed with joy rather than fear.
One off the top of my head, Lambeth Country Show, and I'm literally just plucking that off the top of my head, which has turned to be, to a certain extent, a kind of a reggae and rap festival, however you want to describe it. But they're not subject to the same potential use of firearms, are they?
No, that's true. That's true. But I mean, God, you know better than most of them that over the years, black music events have always been heavily policed, always been heavily licensed, always been much more under scrutiny than very similar, white events or events that weren't deemed to be from those communities. And yes, it's the work of loads of people over the years that maybe mean you can have Lambeth Fair without people freaking out too much. But still, with Carnival, that fear remains, it seems.
And I'm sorry to go back nearly half a century, but 1976 and 1978, 1976, 77, there were riots at the Carnival. And arguably there were potential ignition points at subsequent carnivals when all the steaming came about in the 80s, for example, that you'll remember. But certainly those two riots where you saw in 1976, you saw police turning around and running for their lives, arguably. Yes. And you look at that and you think, well, if there's a history there, do you err on the side of caution, future, and for how long? I don't know.
But come on, Dan. Yes, I remember those times as well. The idea that you're going to police, you're going to plan your policing in 2023 based on what happened in 1976 is ridiculous. Surely you look back over the last decade of carnivals, and yes, okay, there are problems. None of those problems would be solved by rubber bullets, by the way. Not one of those problems would be solved by rubber bullets.
When one thinks of something like Black Lives Matter protests, during COVID in particular, tensions were high, I think it's fair to say, at that time. So perhaps baton authorization seems easier to understand, many might say, a scenario like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I like to be fair. I still think, the bottom line is they saw black people angry and they were and so that's why they were sanctioned for those demos.
Tensions were pretty high. So again, do you see that this kind of authorization seems easier to understand in that sort of setting?
No, look, yes, I think it's fair to say that it's easier to understand. If you remember what was going on in the States at the time, whole cities were burning, basically. I can understand the fear, but I still come back to the question, why only those events? All the things that have happened in the last 6 years, why were those the only things that you thought maybe we might need these plastic bullets?
And what the point that the mayor is making, Sadiq Khan, or at least the spokesperson for Sadiq Khan, seems to be that he never knew this. He never knew this was happening.
I don't know. I mean, I imagine an awful lot of things come across the mayor's desk. I have got to say, this is one of those things that I certainly didn't know we were allowed to. The Met were even. It was even an idea that they could use rubber bullets in London. So I guess it's not a shock that Sadiq didn't know. But now that he knows, I hope he does something about it.
So that carnival happening at the end of this month is something that people from this part of the world, in Derby, elsewhere in the country, the black community, family in London, friends in London, it's almost a ritual. Many people going to Notting Hill Carnival. What would provide you and others thinking of attending at the end of this month to Notting Hill Carnival that they will not be in danger of being caught up in a Baton type situation?
Well, to be honest, I'm going to go to Carnival regardless. I almost see it as a duty. It's sort of to credit the ancestors, the people that went before that did have those struggles. So I will go, I've always gone to Carnival and I will always go.
Now, as you talk about Notting Hill, as I say, it's coming up at the end of the month. And I know there's lots of people looking forward to coming to London and Londoners themselves. It's a moment of celebration very often for the entire city. I mean, what would you say to people who are thinking about attending Notting Hill at the end of the month, knowing now that, this is something that's happening in the background?
Well, I suppose the first thing I'd say is these things haven't been deployed. That's worth remembering. But my biggest message is come. I'm a Londoner. It's the time I'm most proud of London. It's a time when London is at its very best. Come, enjoy, soak up the cultures that make us who we are, and be safe and be welcomed. That's what I'd say.
That's lovely. Maurice Mcleod, thank you so much for your time this evening. London, of course, councillor, and I hope you do enjoy Carnival at the end of the month. If I wasn't at work, I'll be there as well, I promise you.
Brilliant.
You take care.
Take care.
Maurice, absolute pleasure talking to you. Councillor Maurice Mcleod there.